Hello, you are listening to Tyler's Journal, where I make it everybody else's problem that I have an internet connection. This episode is also available as a blog. Enjoy. Episode 2, Blind Empiricism. Picture this: you're lost in a new city, and instead of consulting a map or asking for directions, you decide to photograph every street sign, storefront, and passing car, convinced that somewhere in those thousands of pictures lies the path to your destination. Sounds absurd, right? Yet this is exactly how many researchers, businesses, and analysts approach problem-solving today through blind empiricism. In our data-obsessed world, we've become digital hoarders, collecting vast amounts of information like overzealous squirrels storing nuts for a winter that never comes. From fitness apps tracking every conceivable bodily movement to companies logging each microsecond of user behavior, we're drowning in data while starving for actual insights. But what's wrong with collecting lots of data? Isn't more information always better? Well, as it turns out, blindly accumulating data without a theoretical framework is like trying to build a house by randomly piling up construction materials. You might end up with an impressive pile, but good luck finding a door. In this exploration of blind empiricism, we'll uncover why this seemingly innocent approach to research can lead us astray, how to spot it in action, and most importantly, how to avoid falling into its seductive trap. Because remember, just as having all the ingredients in the world won't make you a chef, having all the data in the world won't automatically lead you to understanding. Blind empiricism is essentially the collect first, think later approach to research and analysis. It's the belief that if we gather enough data, patterns and insights will magically emerge without any theoretical foundation or hypothesis. Imagine trying to understand why people fall in love by collecting detailed statistics about their height, shoe size, favorite ice cream flavor, and Netflix preferences without first understanding human psychology or emotion. That's blind empiricism in action. Facebook and other social media giants collect unfathomable amounts of data every click, scroll, pause, and emoji reaction. Yet, despite having more behavioral data than any researcher in history, they still struggle with basic problems like identifying genuine engagement versus mindless scrolling. Why? Because collecting billions of data points about user behavior doesn't automatically translate into understanding human psychology and social dynamics. Remember the sacred 10,000 steps goal everyone obsesses over. This wasn't derived from medical research or careful study of human physiology. It originated from a 1960s Japanese marketing campaign for a pedometer because the Japanese character for 10,000 Chinese letter looked like a person walking. Yet millions of people religiously track this arbitrary number, believing it represents optimal health. Major retailers like Target and Walmart collect extensive customer data, from purchase history to store navigation patterns. One famous case involved Target predicting a teenage girl's pregnancy before her family knew, based on subtle changes in her shopping patterns. While impressive, this raised serious questions about privacy and the ethical implications of blind data collection. More importantly, despite having mountains of customer data, many retailers still struggle with basic questions about customer satisfaction and loyalty. In medical research, blind empiricism can be particularly dangerous. Consider researchers who collect vast datasets about patient symptoms without understanding underlying biological mechanisms. They might discover that people who drink coffee have lower rates of a certain disease, leading to headlines about coffee's health benefits. However, without understanding the biological pathways involved, they might miss crucial factors like socioeconomic status, lifestyle differences, or other variables that actually explain the correlation. Schools often collect extensive data about student performance test scores, attendance rates, homework completion times, even how long students spend reading each textbook page online. Yet, many struggle to improve educational outcomes because they're drowning in numbers without understanding fundamental principles of learning and cognitive development. It's more dangerous than you think actually. Blind empiricism creates an illusion of scientific rigor. Having lots of data makes people feel their conclusions are well supported, even when they're built on shaky theoretical grounds. Collecting and analyzing data is expensive and time-consuming. Without proper theoretical guidance, organizations often gather massive amounts of irrelevant information. When you don't know what you're looking for, you're likely to miss important patterns or misinterpret the ones you find. It's like trying to diagnose a car problem by measuring every single component without understanding how engines work. Blind empiricism often leads to confusing correlation with causation. Yes, ice cream sales and crime rates both increase in summer, but that doesn't mean ice cream causes crime. When organizations collect data without clear purpose or theoretical framework, they often stumble into ethical problems around privacy, consent, and data use. The irony of blind empiricism is that in trying to be more scientific by collecting more data, researchers often end up being less scientific by ignoring the fundamental principle of theory-driven inquiry. It's like trying to become a better cook by buying more ingredients rather than learning cooking principles. Let's talk about how to stay out of the data hoarding rabbit hole in a way that actually makes sense in the real world. First things first, think of your research like cooking a meal. You wouldn't just buy random ingredients hoping a gourmet dish magically appears. You start with a recipe and a plan. The theory-first approach is your best friend here. Before you even think about collecting data, take a step back and ask yourself what you're really trying to understand. It's like being a detective. You don't just photograph everything at a crime scene. You follow leads based on your understanding of how crimes typically work. Here's where it gets practical. Whenever you're tempted to collect a piece of data, ask yourself why. Not in a philosophical way, but in a, what am I actually going to do with this information way. If you can't answer that question in plain English that your grandmother would understand, you might be heading down the blind empiricism path. Let's make this real with a simple example. Say you're trying to improve a coffee shop's business. Instead of tracking every conceivable metric, customer hair color, shoe size, and whether they use their left or right hand to hold their cup, start with a theory about what matters. Maybe you believe customer satisfaction is linked to wait times and drink temperature. Great, now you have a focused direction for your data collection. The pre-registration shield, as researchers call it, is another powerful tool. It's like writing down your predictions for a sports game before it starts. It keeps you honest. Write down what you expect to find and why before you start collecting data. This prevents the all-too-human tendency to see patterns where none exist. One of the most effective strategies is what I like to call the context framework. Think about your research like you're joining a conversation that's been going on for years. What do we already know about this topic? What existing theories might explain what we're seeing? How would different results affect real-world decisions? This isn't just academic fluff, it's about making sure your research actually means something in the real world. Here's a hard truth. Sometimes less data is more. Having 10 well-chosen measurements is infinitely better than having 1,000 random ones. It's like the difference between having a thoughtful conversation with someone versus recording everything they say all day. Quality beats quantity every time. The communication test is perhaps the most practical tool of all. If you can't explain to a friend over coffee why you're collecting certain data and what different results would mean, you might be wandering into blind empiricism territory. Keep it simple, keep it focused, and always be able to explain your reasoning in plain language. Remember that time your friend bought a fitness tracker and started obsessing over every possible metric it could measure? That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Instead of being overwhelmed by data, stay focused on what actually matters for your specific question or problem. The key is to think like a scientist but talk like a normal person. Keep asking yourself, what am I really trying to understand here? If you can't answer that clearly, it's time to step back and rethink your approach. So you've learned about blind empiricism. Now what? Imagine you're at a party, stay with me here, and someone proudly announces they've collected data on every single party they've attended in the last 5 years. The exact number of chips eaten, the precise angle of people's elbows when they drink, and the mathematical correlation between the host's sock color and guest satisfaction. That's not research, that's what happens when someone has too much time and a spreadsheet addiction. But here's the thing, we're all a little guilty of this data hoarding mentality. We're like squirrels who have discovered spreadsheets, frantically collecting numbers and metrics as if they're acorns that will get us through a digital winter. Sure, having lots of data makes us feel smart and scientific, like we're somehow more legitimate because we have 17 different ways to measure the same thing. Remember though, just as owning every kitchen gadget in the world won't make you a chef, collecting every possible data point won't automatically lead to understanding. It's like trying to understand love by measuring heart rates and pupil dilation. Sure, the data is there, but you're kind of missing the point. The next time you find yourself knee-deep in data collection, ask yourself, am I being a researcher or a digital hoarder? If your response is, but what if we need this data someday? Congratulations, you might have a case of blind empiricism. The cure: step away from the spreadsheet, take a deep breath, and remember that sometimes less is more. Let's make a pact: no more collecting data just because we can. No more pretending that having more numbers somehow makes us more scientific. Instead, let's be the people who know why we're measuring what we're measuring. Let's be the ones who can explain our research without putting everyone to sleep. And most importantly, let's be the ones who understand that sometimes the most scientific thing you can do is stop collecting data and start thinking about what it all means. After all, in a world drowning in data, the real heroes are the ones who can find the signal in the noise, not the ones with the biggest spreadsheets. Now go forth and research wisely, my friends. Just remember, if your data collection strategy looks like a season of hoarders, it might be time to rethink your approach. If you like what you heard, spread the word. See you again.